We've all seen these red ribbons proudly displayed on the lapels, shirts, and blouses of people all over the country. Most of you probably know that they're meant to be a reminder to all of us about HIV and AIDS. But how much do you really know about HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, and AIDS itself? We take certain things for granted, don't we? For instance, there's no known cure and no known vaccine for HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. That's true. They both can make you very sick and tragically end in an untimely death. Sadly, that's also true. AIDS and HIV, you can't get them. Now that's definitely not true. Tonight, we invite you and your family to join us for the Channel 4 Family AIDS Quiz. It just may save your life.
Here's number 10. Which of the
True or
following...
false? HIV and AIDS. Question number 7. A positive test
Which of the
result.
following?
Number 5. True or false? Condom.
Infected with HIV. I'll know it because I'll...
Good evening. I'm Channel 4 medical specialist Ileana Bravo. If we scared you a bit, that's good, because HIV and AIDS is frightening stuff. Tonight, we want to get past that fear, and we want to arm you with the information you need to protect yourself. Our Family AIDS Quiz will test your knowledge about HIV and AIDS. Now, you'll want to have a piece of paper and pencil handy to take notes, because the information in our quiz is very important. A word of caution, because our quiz deals with mature and sensitive subject matter, we recommend that kids and grown-ups watch the program together so that adults can provide specific information related to our questions. Now, parents, you should know that Dade and Broward Public Schools helped us prepare this quiz by allowing us to use their classroom curriculum on AIDS. And one last bit of information, we've asked some very special guests to be a part of our quiz. We're sure you'll recognize them. Now let's get started.
Here's question number 1. What is AIDS? What is the difference between AIDS and HIV?
Many people think that HIV and AIDS are the same thing. They're not. HIV is a virus. It's the virus that can lead to AIDS. A virus is a minute organism that feeds off of cells. Viruses gain entrance to living cells where they can alter the genetic makeup of that cell. When this happens, watch out. If the antibodies that our bodies naturally manufacture to fight and kill foreign viruses aren't strong enough to do their job, a virus can continue to grow and multiply and eventually pose a major problem to our health.
HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus. It is a virus that can infect the body, particularly the immune system of the body, so that the immune system is damaged and cannot fight off infections that it normally would be able to.
Eventually, and this applies to everyone who becomes infected with HIV, the body weakens to the point where it develops a serious illness. According to the Centers for Disease Control, once a person infected with HIV develops certain diseases such as Kaposi sarcoma, some types of pneumonia or lymphoma, or their T-cell count drops below 200, a person is said to have AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome. In order to get AIDS, you first have to be infected with HIV. HIV leads to the development of sickness, which in some cases will be diagnosed as AIDS, in some cases it won't. Again, it all depends if the particular illness you get falls under the definition for AIDS by the Centers for Disease Control.
People become infected with the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, through the transmission of bodily fluids. These include blood, vaginal secretions, and semen. They do not become infected with HIV through casual contact, such as shaking hands or skin contact, or transmission via objects. One other way that the HIV virus can be transmitted is from an infected woman to her unborn child.
Okay, now it's time to test our knowledge of HIV and AIDS, because the only way to not suffer from them is not to get infected in the first place.
HIV can be transmitted in which of the following ways?
A. Shaking hands.
B. Hugging.
C. Intimate sexual contact.
D. Casual kissing.
Or E. All of the above.
All right, so the answer to this should be fresh in your mind. Remember what Dr. Friedman just told us?
People become infected with the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, through the transmission of bodily fluids. They do not become infected with HIV through casual contact, such as shaking hands or skin contact, or transmission via objects, or from casual kissing.
So, shaking hands? Nope, that's not going to do it. How about hugging? Not through skin contact. Kissing? Nope, can't get HIV or AIDS from casual kissing. The correct answer is C, intimate sexual contact. Now that's where body fluids are exchanged, and that's the method by which most infections of HIV happen. That's why practicing safe sex is so important. And the safest form of safe sex is abstinence, not having sex at all. Okay, let's move on.
The third question, true or false? Birth control pills prevent the transmission of HIV.
This is probably one of the most often asked questions concerning HIV and AIDS prevention. And we just mentioned safe sex and abstinence as a means of prevention. But what about birth control pills?
Birth control pills are contraceptives that ladies can take to prevent pregnancy. They are not effective at all for prevention of HIV transmission because they still allow the exchange of bodily fluids to take place.
In other words, it's not barrier protection for a woman or a man. Birth control pills will prevent a woman from getting pregnant, but they will not prevent the transmission of HIV from one person to the other. They have no effect on either HIV or AIDS. So the correct answer is false. Birth control pills do not prevent the transmission of HIV. Stick with us. We'll be right back with our Family AIDS quiz after this.
Which of the following can give you HIV? A, toilet seats used by an HIV-positive person. B, mosquito bites. C, using a telephone used by an HIV-positive person. D, all of the above. Or E, none of the above.
Let's take a look at our choices. Remember that objects do not transmit HIV or AIDS. We heard that from Dr. Friedman. So we can rule out toilet seats and telephones, even if they've been used recently by an HIV-infected person. Now that leaves mosquito bites. Let's take a closer look at our pesky little friend, the mosquito. A mosquito does his damage by piercing our skin with his stinger and drawing a very little bit of our blood. He does not inject blood into our body, so there's no exchange of bodily fluids. Also, remember, HIV does not live long outside of the body. In fact, it's a very, very fragile virus. So the correct answer is E, none of the above. You can't get HIV or AIDS from a toilet seat or a telephone or from a mosquito.
Okay, Ileana, question number 5. True or false? Condoms are an effective method to prevent the spread of HIV.
Okay, this is what they look like when you buy them in the drugstore. They come wrapped like this in foil. They're called condoms. Condoms are a form of barrier protection preventing sperm from being transferred from one person to the other, which also means condoms can prevent HIV from passing from one person to the other. Now, I know by now you remember this guy.
Condoms are one form of contraceptive that do prevent the transmission of the HIV virus. The most effective kind of condom is a latex condom that is strong in durability and also does not allow for penetration of any of the virus particles.
Your chances of infection are almost nothing, but there's still a chance that you can become infected while using a condom. If you're sexually active, you need to use a condom each and every time you have sex. And you must use it properly, because the one time you don't use one or you use one the wrong way, it could be the time you become infected. By the way, there's also a very small chance that the condom itself will fail, so there's always a possibility of becoming infected even when using a condom the correct way. The only surefire way to prevent sexual transmission of HIV and AIDS is to practice abstinence. What does that mean? Not having sex.
It's time for question number 6. True or false? If I'm infected with HIV, I'll know it because I'll feel different.
Now, that's a very common statement. An awful lot of people think that they can tell when they become infected the same way you know you've got a cold or a sore throat. But with HIV, it's very different. Meet Christy. She's a 25-year-old woman who's been HIV positive for the past 2 years.
I didn't think there was any way that I could be HIV positive. I didn't look different. I didn't feel different. But I felt my boyfriend was untrue to me, and I went and got tested, and I tested HIV positive.
So the correct answer is false. You can be infected with HIV and not know it at all. The only way to know for certain if you're infected is to have a blood test performed by your doctor or a certified healthcare facility. And you can have an HIV test without revealing your identity. Now let's move on to our next question.
Thanks, Ileana. I have question number 7. A positive test result for HIV will show up how long after being infected with the virus? A, 3 to 6 months. B, 6 months to 1 year. C, 1 year to 5 years. D, 5 to 11 years.
Now here's a question that's caused a lot of confusion. There's a myth that you won't test positive for HIV until some outward signs of full-blown AIDS are visible, lesions and weight loss, for example. It may take years before any outward signs of AIDS are apparent. But remember,
HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. It can live in a person's body for even several years before causing any of the diseases that occur with AIDS. When the virus infects the body, it is natural for the immune system to produce antibodies to that virus. It is the presence of these antibodies that the HIV test looks for. These antibodies will be found usually 3 to 6 months after the infection occurs.
So A is the correct answer. It generally takes from 3 to 6 months from the time of infection until a test for HIV will read positive. We'll be right back.
True or false? Donating or receiving blood is a high-risk way to contract HIV.
Now, this was before 1985, but there were instances where some people did get HIV from receiving a blood transfusion. That was before we knew a lot about HIV and AIDS and how they're passed on from person to person.
The first thing that you have to know is that there is a difference between the risk of giving blood and the risk of receiving blood. When you give blood to another human being, the needle that is used is pre-sterilized and then discarded so that the risk of getting AIDS or any other infectious disease when you give blood is essentially zero. There is a risk associated with receiving a unit of blood. That risk is extremely small, but not zero. Every single unit of blood that we receive is tested for the presence of the HIV or AIDS virus. And only those units that are found negative for that virus are used for transfusion. If you need blood, however, you should discuss with your physician some of the other options that you may have, such as giving your own blood to yourself at the time of upcoming surgery. The blood supply today is safer than it's ever been in the history of blood banking.
So the answer is false. You should feel very safe if you need a blood transfusion. It's important to realize, though, that getting blood that's infected with HIV into your body almost guarantees that you'll get it too. That's why you need to be careful if someone around you is bleeding. Should you get any of their blood on you, wash with soap and water or bleach and water as soon as possible. And whatever you do, forget about blood brother and blood sister ceremonies.
Okay, Ileana, the next question is, true or false, you can tell someone has AIDS or is HIV positive by just looking at them.
Many people feel that they can tell if someone around them is HIV positive, but you can't tell.
Could you tell if they had diabetes?
Could you tell if someone had that?
Or what if it were a heart murmur?
Or kidney stones?
Or iron deficiency?
Believe it or not, one of us is infected with HIV. Can you tell which one of us it is?
I've got it.
It's me. I'm HIV positive.
And I'm HIV positive too. I'll bet you couldn't tell.
The answer? It's false. You can't tell if someone's HIV positive simply by looking at them.
Here's number 10. Which of the following are symptoms of AIDS? A, weight loss. B, swollen lymph nodes. C, fatigue. D, lesions on the skin. Or E, all of the above.
Remember when Dr. Friedman told us that AIDS is a collection of different diseases? Well, each disease has its own symptoms. For instance, in the case of lymphoma, your lymph nodes swell up with cancer. With Kaposi sarcoma, skin lesions develop. Also associated with AIDS are weight loss and feelings of physical fatigue.
My body is totally different. An average weight for me is about 125, and I weigh right now about 94.
Lori has been HIV positive since 1985. She developed AIDS in 1989. In 1992, lymphoma set in.
During chemo is when I really dropped a lot of weight, and it was wild because one day I just looked in the mirror and my body was totally different. I never imagined that I would be that thin, and it wasn't a good thin. It wasn't like, oh, I could go running around in bikinis now. I had no body. It was like unattractive thin.
It's scary stuff, HIV and AIDS. By now, you should have figured out the correct answer. E, all of the above. We'll be right back with our Family AIDS quiz.
Okay, Eliana, it's time for number 11. True or false? Drug and alcohol users are more likely to contract HIV than non-users.
Let's take a quick look at that. What happens when you start to drink or take drugs? Your reasoning and reactions are adversely affected, aren't they? In other words, you're not thinking as clearly or as cautiously as you normally would if you weren't under the influence. That can lead you to making a decision not based on logic, but based on the spur of the moment. The second thing that makes drug and alcohol use a higher risk for HIV infection is that oftentimes with drug use, needles are shared. If the first person is HIV positive, well, you know what can happen. So the answer is true. Drug and alcohol users are more likely to get HIV than non-users.
Okay, here's our last question. True or false? HIV and AIDS are gay diseases.
That's probably one of the most widely held beliefs about HIV and AIDS. You don't have to be either gay or straight to become infected with HIV. You just have to be human. So the answer is false. HIV and AIDS can happen to you whether you're heterosexual or homosexual. For more information about HIV and AIDS, there are several numbers you can call. They're toll-free and they're highly confidential. You can ask them anything you want about HIV or AIDS, and you get a direct answer to your questions. Before we say goodbye, I want to stress again how important it is to know and understand the facts about HIV and AIDS. Knowing how to protect yourself or someone you love from becoming HIV infected can save lives. Remember, it's your one and only life. Don't be foolish with it. Stay safe. Stay alive. Good night.